Drink with James, episode 179. This is my last episode I'm filming. We actually filmed episode 180 yesterday, so doing things in a little bit reverse order. Look, it is 10 in the morning, which is why my whiskey glass is empty, but I do want to call attention to this glass. You know, guys, I've been complaining about the fact that Tiffany's has not sent me any glasses, and they sent a bunch of menswear guys whiskey glasses, and I felt, personally offended that I was not on that list. Well, one of the influencers in the Fohr platform and a Drink with James watcher, Candace from Style in Your 70s, sent me 4 beautiful Tiffany's glasses. And, I ask you, what have you done for me lately? Because Candace right now, she is the gold star. She is my new favorite influencer. Thank you very much. In all honesty, all gifts are acceptable. You don't have to be that extravagant. You just have to give me something. As I said, last episode of the year, last episode of the decade. Funny, I am wearing this jacket, which was the first expensive piece of clothing I ever bought in my life. It's really not like my style anymore, but I have like an emotional, sentimental connection to it, and I can't seem to get rid of it. I saved for months for this thing. Finally, I would walk by and visit it. You guys ever visit clothes that you want to buy? So I would walk by this store and I would go in and visit it, and I was saving money, and I finally one day was like, I'm gonna go buy this jacket. I walk in, ready to spend, I don't know, maybe it was $800 or something. $800 on it. They don't have the jacket anymore. I'm totally heartbroken. I go back to my office, and Gilt was a thing at the time. It had just launched. Gilt had a sale that day with this jacket in it for $300. So I won. And that really started off the decade for me, being pretty fucking great. And we're gonna talk a bit about where influencer marketing has gone in the last 10 years, some things that I think are gonna happen in the future. Look, 10 years ago, I had just really started picking up a camera. I was starting to get a following on Tumblr. I probably at the time had a decent following on Tumblr. The idea for Fohr was not an idea yet at all, but I was starting to see, that the things that people were doing on Tumblr were potentially interesting for brands, and that, there may be a path to this not just being a hobby, but it being a career. And I think to see where we have gone in 10 years, right? I don't know exactly, honestly, when Instagram launched. Instagram launched, I think, 2009. But for years, it was really just an editing app. Nobody actually took it seriously as a publishing or community building place. And it was around 2013. I mean, even when we launched Fohr in 2012, Instagram was a joke. It was Tumblr and blogs. So, so much has changed. And I go back to that Keith Richards quote I love, where they would ask him, did you ever think that you started the Rolling Stones? Did you ever think that this would happen? Did you ever dream that this would happen? He's like, yeah, I dreamed this would happen every day. I just never thought it would. And I think if I look back to, when I was starting this business and thinking about what it could be and what the industry could be, sure, this was my dream that this would be happening. I'm not sure I ever actually thought it would happen. And it's been, an honor to not only build this business with the amazing people that work here at Fohr, but to help build this industry. We were the first influencer marketing platform really in the world. And we're out pretty far ahead of everyone else in thinking about what this could be. And every time that we have an event and people come to the office and say that, Fohr has played a part in helping to change their lives, whether it be giving them confidence, to take Instagram more seriously or quit their jobs and do this full time. That was why the business was started. It was started because I was so unhappy in my career, in my job, and the internet gave me a kind of new lease on life, and it gave me a place to for the first time in my career, be exceptional and do something special. And it, moving to New York without any connections and without a network, you felt that the city wasn't that egalitarian, that it wasn't just the smartest and most talented people got the opportunities, it was who you knew. The internet, for me, changed that completely. And the dream was that, we could create a platform that would further, would further that egalitarian nature of the internet and would make it about what you did and not where you were from or who you knew. And we 100% are not there yet, but I think have made huge strides. And, without these platforms, without Instagram, without Tumblr, rest in peace, and blogs, a lot of people who are out there doing what they love would be doing something else. And I think that is something that is not to be taken for granted, and we should all be thankful. And as much as we shit on Instagram, as much as influencers complain about Instagram and all the changes that they make, and there will only be more changes, and they'll only continue to kind of break that platform down and break it away from the things that we loved about it initially, we do have to recognize that, without it, our lives would be very, very different. And I think on the whole would be worse. And so while, Mark, you will never see this video. I do know some people at Facebook and Instagram watch Drink with James, and I don't know that people say thank you enough. Thank you for building this amazing tool that allows people to, be weird and different and creative and make a living off that. That's a beautiful and rare thing. So it has been a wild decade. I have aged quite a bit, but I am more excited going into this next decade about what influencer marketing can be than I was when I first started thinking about this stuff 10 years ago. It is not going away. There is not a bubble. There is a lot of things that need to change. There are bad actors. The industry is just young and it needs to grow up. All of those things are true, but there's just been a fundamental shift in media from the power being held in the hands of a few to the power being held in the hands of many. That is only going to continue. We're not going to reconsolidate that and go back to the old ways. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, I want to buy a Vogue. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Nobody's going to do that. The world has changed. You guys are part of that. It's our thing to fuck up at this point. And screwing it up is possible. I think the influencer space needs to get more effective. I think that, in the next few years, we have to be able to drive real ROI for brands for this to be able to be sustainable. You have to remember that you are a salesperson, you're selling shit. And when you take that sponsored post, you have to think about, can I give that brand back that much value? If they're paying you $500, $5,000, or $50,000, can you give back that value? Right now, a lot of influencers are, and a lot of influencers aren't. And the ones that aren't are causing marketers to look at the industry and say, this isn't worth it. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not investing here. And marketers will play and they'll experiment with money for a time. But if the belt tightens, if we enter a recession, brand awareness campaigns, experimental marketing, first thing to go out the door, And so while the chances of a recession fluctuate, and every day I read the journal, one day there's going to be a recession, one day there's not. The fact is that, as an influencer next year, you should be focused on efficacy, focused on being really effective for your brand partners, making sure this stuff works. Almost every tool that we are building right now is hyper-focused on that. It is on how can we provide more value for brands for the money that they're spending in this space? How can we push influencers to create content in a way that is driving people through to an action, a purchase, sign up, whatever it might be? That's the big task. If we figure that out, the market will never die. If marketers can spend $1 and get $2 out, they will do that until the ends of time. And it won't be about like allocating budget. It becomes like, if you think of the way a brand thinks about Facebook advertising, traditional Facebook advertising, it's not what can we afford, it's how much can we spend until that equation stops working, until the equation where we put $2 in and we get 5 out. How much money can we put into that until that breaks down? And that is how they allocate budget. Just very different than how it works in the influencer space, which is how much money do we essentially have to flush down a toilet here? Again, that's a bit extreme. But if we can shift to be more performance focused, if we can shift to be able to report on what is actually happening and how we're impacting a brand's bottom line, then the mentality will shift on the budgets, and your earning potential as an influencer will shift dramatically. So that, I think, is going to be a big focus of the year. And it brings us into, I think, the first question. Which is, do I need to have a blog? You don't need to have a blog, but as I was just saying, you need to figure out a way to make this stuff work for brands. If we look at our highest performing influencers from a sales perspective, how much do they sell for a brand? I would say 98% of the people in the top are bloggers. They're people that are still publishing to their blog every day. That is universally true. And there has been, in the last few years, a shift away from bloggers. It feels old school. It's not as exciting. It's not as visual. It's not as fun. It's not as trendy. That pendulum is swinging back. And I can say internally, we are doing more and more campaigns where we are trying to engage bloggers, people that are still publishing to the blog, as well as Instagram, in our campaigns, because they are multitudes more effective, like 10, 50, 100x more effective. If you have 100,000 Instagram followers and someone else has 100,000 Instagram followers and a healthy blog traffic, and they can drive 10, 20, 50 times the traffic and sales that you can, you'll never compete, And there's influencers that are more like cool girls, like that are just, or they're content creators, they create beautiful content. That's a different thing. If that's your thing, do you need a blog? No. Do I think that you should have one? Yes, but you need to figure out a way to try and make this more effective for your brand partners. If not a blog, maybe it's a newsletter. Maybe it's a different way to use stories. Maybe it's a YouTube channel. But Instagram traditionally has not been great at driving sales and conversions. And I think that as the industry starts to reevaluate its expectations and starts to get more aggressive with trying to pull ROI out of the space, you need to think of what you're going to be doing outside of Instagram. And the other thing is you can't totally trust any platform. You can't trust Instagram, you can't trust TikTok, you can't trust Twitter. And having a blog, having a newsletter, having something that you own is really important. And if you have 200,000 Instagram followers and you can get 1,000 of them a day to come to a blog, that's valuable. And next year that goes to 5,000, and then the next year to 10,000, well, then you start to create a space that is all yours, and nobody can change the rules of that space because you own it. And I've seen, we talk about Grace Atwood and Jess Kirby and, who are friends of mine a lot on the show. And it's because this blog thing, the question about blogs is in my mind. I was just hiking Runyon in LA, which is like, what a terrible cliche, with Grace Atwood. And, excuse me, I told her, when I met her 2 years ago, I was on Drink with James saying blogs will be dead in 5 years. I think that their time is over. Blogs are dead. This is not going to be a thing. And I think I was wrong, and my mind has changed. And I think more and more it is important for influencers to be creating a space that they own, that they can take with them, that is platform agnostic. So as you go into the new year, think about that. Again, it doesn't have to be a blog. It can be a newsletter. It can be YouTube, although that's another platform subject to its own rules, but at least you're diversifying. It can be a monthly zine that you print that people subscribe to. Something. Do something that you can own that other people don't control. Look, for the last section of this, I was super excited to bring in Whitney from The Reclaimed. Whitney is from Philadelphia, smaller influencer, 13,000 followers. She came in from Philly this week to have a conversation about privilege and politics and what that means in minority communities on Instagram. She is super inspiring. I love the conversation, and we are going to end the show with that. Very special guest today. I have Whitney Alese from the great city of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. I actually almost moved to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I went to college in Pennsylvania, in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and nobody knows where that is. And so Philly was like, that's the city, right? And I had this interview where they paid for my train ticket to go out and interview.
Fancy.
While I was still in college, and I was like, that is incredible that somebody would pay for my train ticket to come and interview me and then not give me the job.
I think it worked out.
It eventually did. It eventually did, but we could have been neighbors. I could have been. Who knows what would have happened if I was in Philly? But thank you for being here. We're gonna get to why you're here in a minute, which is, well, I'm gonna give you a little taste of what's to come. We're gonna talk about politics. We're gonna talk about privilege. We're gonna talk about those things together. The two P's, if you guys don't know, that is now what the two P's are. It's politics and privilege. But before we get into that, maybe let us know how did you get into this world?
So I've been writing literally all my life. My mom makes a joke about how she could literally paper her house with all of the pages that I've written. But
did you go through like an emo poem phase, or
no, never.
Okay.
More like a Maya Angelou poem phase.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, Maya Angelou, Nikki Giovanni, all of those folks. God, like heroes, true heroes. But I went through a really, really rough time in my life. A lot of personal loss. And one of my friends suggested, well, why don't you start a blog? Like, just start writing these things down, start getting it out, because at the time I wasn't writing. So around that time, I was also doing a lot of thrift store shopping, and I was finding these amazing things at the thrift store. And I was like, who would throw these out? And the two started to click. And so I started writing about those things, and I started relating stories about those things. And then a few years in, I was like, you know what? There's other things going on. Am I allowed to curse on here?
Yes.
There's other shit going on in the world. And, I could talk about this really cute outfit, or I could talk about something that matters, something that's important. Not to be Debbie Downer, because I know that blogging and Instagram and that stuff is a form of escapism. And I get all of that, but at the same time, there's shit going on. We got to talk about it. Long and the short, The Reclaimed went from talking about things I was finding at thrift stores to pretty much anything, because people are multifaceted. And so a lot of things can exist at one time. You could absolutely slay an outfit and talk about why, Black Lives Matter, things like that.
And how far into, publishing online, having the blog, did you start to bring the real shit into that?
For me, it was really early on, because being Black and in America, you kind of can't ignore these things that are happening. Like, sure, yeah, you can constantly post the things that you're finding at stores and whatever, but the truth be told, we're kind of raised with this intrinsic understanding that America really wasn't built for us. It was just built on us. And that in a lot of ways, you could either ignore or fight the second-class citizenship that people kind of throw on you from just being a person of color, and then add on to that the tax of being a woman. And so, it was pretty early on. It was probably like within the first year or so. Like I feel like I was alternating in between, and now it's just grown into whatever I feel like talking about, whatever's happening, whatever's going on. So.
And, today, do you find yourself gravitating towards, like, do you feel like you're pretty balanced in what you're talking about, or are you more focused now on issues and talking through, and being activist and things like that?
Right. I find that I'm pretty balanced. It's really interesting because someone asked me if I would call myself an activist, and I was like, well, I would never call myself an activist because activists are out there doing the work. I get to sit in like pretty coffee shops and tap on my Apple laptop about the things that like are going on in the world. But like activists are out there really doing the work and really in the fight. I'm just talking about it. But that's something anyone can do. Anyone can talk about it, and knowledge is spread, by us opening our mouths and asking questions and talking to each other about it. So.
And have you been surprised, talking about things that a lot of people aren't, don't want to talk about? Have you been surprised at all in the reaction or the community that's come out of that? Is part one of the question. And then part two, I think, is like, what is that? Have you been surprised by what that community looks like and how they act?
Actually, yeah. So at first I was really nervous because all around me I was seeing skinny women posting these outfits, posting their vacations, posting the yummy things they were eating, or, the beauty products they were being sent. And here I go, a little black girl talking about, well, we shouldn't shoot children in the street, and, police brutality is a real thing. And all of a sudden, two things started happening. So the people who were following me for the fashion instantly dropped off. Like a lot of them just dropped off. That just wasn't their thing. Mad respect, fine, whatever. But then people who were like everyday people, like, not the power users of Instagram like we are, but everyday people started following me and started saying, like, I love the fact, and I get these emails all the time, like, I love the fact that you can talk about the things you're putting on your skin, or things that are helping you sleep, or the things that are helping you with your health, but also talk about, mental wellness for a person who is like dealing with the trauma of racism, that all those things can be true in one microcosm, in one being, and that, that conversation can cover a multitude of issues. And so I was really, really surprised that like I said, it grew like wildfire, and I didn't really expect it. So that was a major surprise. An unpleasant surprise was that when you start telling the truth, a lot of people who are uncomfortable with the truth start to come after you. And so, my block game has to become very strong, because on occasion you'll get like a nasty little, N-word here, or, terrible comment there. And you literally have to be like on it, delete, because I'm not going to give you space. And I'm not even going to give you energy, because there's this thing that exists called do not engage. And I am a big proponent of that. Basically, it goes back to being a preschool teacher, which I was earlier on in life. I've lived like 7 lives.
Wow. Yeah.
Being a preschool teacher, I look, and if a kid's throwing a temper tantrum, you don't engage. You don't give them any energy. You don't give them anything. You let them throw their temper tantrum. And when they're done, you ask them if they're all right. You ask them if that accomplished anything. You make them realize that didn't connect. Do not engage. And so I apply that with, racists and homophobes and bigots of all types. So
I wish you could, I wish more people would treat Trump that way, and just like, let's just not engage.
No, do not engage. Just don't talk to him. No.
The crying sociopath in the corner. So, how you ended up sitting here, as you said, right? Like, your following isn't as big as the people that are usually on this show. You've built a nice community. Your Instagram's at 13,000. That is not easy in this day and age. So cheers to that. But Teza has 800,000.
Yeah.
Right. So the reason you ended up here was, I talked about a few episodes ago. I was talking about politics and saying that I think it is irresponsible and it is no longer acceptable for influencers, if you have a platform, that you have to educate yourself and you have to speak about this stuff. And that might mean that some influencers are Republicans, God forbid. Totally their right to talk about it, but like, you have to be talking about it, right? And there's the old kind of adage, right? Like if everyone in the country voted, we'd never have another Republican president ever. You know, we just wouldn't. But people don't vote, except old dying white people who are Republicans vote. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
I talked about politics. I talked about this call to talk about politics. And you threw up a story just saying, you know, imagine the privilege of not having to talk about this.
Yes.
And it wasn't something I thought about bringing up or mentioned on the show. And I instantly was just like, come talk about this, you know, because I can't talk about it precisely because I didn't think to talk about it because I live that privilege. I mean, look where we're filming. Like, right? I've been really fortunate. I was raised, you know, in an affluent family. Like, I didn't even think to bring up privilege when talking about the call to speak on politics. And so I thought, well, let's have you talk about it. So let's talk about that, because a lot of the people that are watching this show are nervous about talking about politics, maybe, and are living in that privilege, you know, and have their biases. How do we, the collective we as a country, and people, I guess, watching this, how do we understand that privilege better, and what should our reaction be to it?
So the first thing that I would say is that people need to listen to each other. People, more often than not, we're all ranting and raving on the internet, you know, and, you know, it was just like we were talking about earlier where, you know, a bunch of Democrats, like, we're screaming in a vacuum, you know, we're screaming at each other, saying, you know, the same things, but just louder.
Trump sucks, Trump sucks, Trump sucks.
It's just a bunch of noise. It's just a bunch of cacophony. Meanwhile, you have a bunch of like Black people like sitting in the corner like, yes, that's all true, but we want someone to make sure that our children aren't shot in the street. You know, we want to make sure that we have proper housing. And so when I went on, it wasn't addressed at you. I actually appreciated that you brought up the fact that more influencers need to talk about politics, because, you know, you're using your powers for good. You know, you being a privileged, affluent white man, you can go into rooms that I can't go into, and you can say things that I can't to people I'll never talk to, because your voice will mean more to them than mine will, you know, and vice versa for me. And so, you know, it's just, Black people have never really been afforded the privilege to just sit and ignore laws, because there have been laws made against us since forever. You know, I was thinking about something just as basic as hair. You know, obviously we have two different textures. Obviously we do.
Both great, by the way. Both
fantastic.
We both two good heads of hair.
Come on now, follicles. We are out here. But I was thinking about the Tingong laws in Louisiana that were made to make sure that Black women had their head covered, because of the ornate styles that we used to have. And this was during the period of slavery, things like that. And that was a law that was legal. It was legal for someone to demand that I covered my hair because of how elaborate it looks. Still thinking about hair and thinking about privilege, you know, how, you know, you might have heard a few influencers of color talk about why it sucks to see, you know, a Kylie Jenner or a Kim Kardashian wearing braids, you know, and it's not about the styles itself. It's about the messaging that we got for decades, that this style was uncouth, it was unclean, that Black women's hair was unprofessional. And it got so bad that there has to be laws in place. The Crown Act from California and New York had to be put into law so that people would not discriminate against people of color for just their hairstyles. And when you think about things like that, you see how we don't really have the privilege to ignore it. We have to pay attention. Like this whole movement about stay woke, stay woke. Well, Black people never went to sleep. Like we've had to stay, because like that meant survival. Yeah. That meant being able to live. And so I think that, you know, with other influencers who say, you know, I really don't want to talk politics because I don't want to lose followers. My answer to that is, do you want an audience or do you want a community? Like, do you want people who are just going to watch you like you're some type of entertainment, or do you want people who are going to engage with you, who are going to trust you, who are going to buy the things that you're selling, but also care about the things that you're talking about, who think that you care about the things that they're talking about? All of that is really, really important, and I think it's missing in the space because we have too many people who want attention and not enough who want to make an impact. So
if we had a mic to drop, I would ask you to drop it, but it's attached to your sweater. So let's say I'm watching this, I'm listening to you, I'm feeling inspired to get out there and to talk about this more. But I don't know, I'm not educated.
Right.
I haven't educated myself on politics because it's not for me, right? And for so long, growing up, it was just like, you don't talk politics.
Oh my God.
I was raised, you're just like, you don't talk politics.
Politics, religion, and money.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't talk about those things.
That's not the case anymore. But there is a huge knowledge gap, right? And the internet can be intimidating because you can say something and then people come at you with all these facts and they know all this stuff. You're wrong, and they start attacking you. Yeah. And then you feel stupid and embarrassed. You say, I'm not going to do that again. So what, to the people that maybe want to talk about this but aren't feeling educated, what do you think the first step is? What do they do when they turn this podcast off or YouTube? Like what should be the next step?
Well, there's a whole slew of incredible influencers who are talking about these things. Not a personal plug. I'm saying there's people who I look to who are talking about these things.
And maybe we'll get a list from you and we'll put it in the
absolutely.
We'll put it in the description.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That are talking about these things. I would say follow them. That's one easy thing, like no one has to even see you do it. Also, the internet is a very big place full of lots of information. We live in an amazing time now where you can learn anything that you want. Go and do some Googling, go and do some searching, read up on some stuff. Like, it doesn't make any sense. We are literally walking around with tiny computers holding the wealth of information of all time of humanity in our pockets. If you want to learn something, you can go learn it. Also, like I said earlier, listen to people. A lot of time people feel attacked when people, particularly when there's a discussion between Black people and white people, and Black people were saying, this was offensive to me. Rather than people saying, well, why was that offensive? Oh, yeah, help me understand. They're like, nah, it didn't happen. Nah, no, forget you.
I didn't mean to be offensive.
You're just, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's the worst one.
I'm sorry you're offended.
Oh, God. It's like, no, that's not what I was trying to get at. It's just like,
it's literally offensive.
Right. It's really offensive. Like, I'm trying to help you. Like, I'm trying to make sure that you don't get canceled. But yeah, just dialogue with people, listen to people, engage with people, and learn. There's so many resources, so many places to start.
And I will say, I think that like if Valerie is watching, hi.
That's how I found her.
Yeah. And for me, having been, this is episode 179.
Whoop whoop.
Like I say shit that pisses people off, and just asking why and being like, can we talk about this, has been transformative in my life. And following Valerie and following a lot of people that live different lives and are passionate about different things and come from different communities, for me, you see, you can start to see the world through someone else's eyes. And I think that like that's the beauty of the internet, right? Is that like you can start to see like, even like how something that's in the news that is interpreted one way on one part of your feed and another on the other. And you see this other viewpoint that you would have never been exposed to, and you're like, that makes a lot of sense actually. And now like I wouldn't have initially thought of it that way. Seeing that, it changes your vision. I think it changes the way that you start to see the world, and you start to see the world as it is, not as you wish it to be.
Right.
Which is, for white people, white men a lot of times, that you are owed this success, that you earned it, and that the world is not unfair.
Right.
But it's supremely fair. It just so happens that you are at the top because you were so good.
Because you were so good. Now, meanwhile, in the Black culture, we have this adage, you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. And don't be a Black woman, because then you have to work 4 times as hard to get a quarter of as much. We were raised on that. Like, you have to work twice as hard. You have to get better grades. You have to. Now you have an entire generation, an entire group of people who feel like their meaning is based upon their work and not who they are. And then we look at people like you and we call you entitled and snotty. And I'm like, that's not it. That's not
a little bit of truth to it.
No. But like, my whole thing, and you're probably gonna hate this, is I never want people to isolate people as in their groups. So like, white people, yeah, come and talk to Black people. Like, let's Black people go talk to white people. Like, we need to engage each other, because too often the rhetoric tries to separate us. And that's the same for Republicans and Democrats. Like, I'm gonna surprise you. I have Republican followers, and a lot of them agree with the same stuff I'm saying, because I'm like, is it political to say that people should be able to live and have their children not separated from them or put in cages to die? Like, is that a political thing? No. And like, is it a political thing to say that people should have health care? Is it a political thing to say that people should have housing and food and education? Those things aren't political. That's something that everyone wants. Gun control, all those things are things that everyone wants. And I feel as though as soon as we all start to engage each other and have these courageous conversations, where we're brave enough to put our armor down, put our weapons aside, and say, hey, I'm a person, you're a person, let's chat, we'll be better off. But we got to start talking to each other, not screaming across the wall at each other.
There you go. I can't think of a better way to end it. If you're not following Whitney, we'll obviously put that link there as well. You should absolutely do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.